Okay, I want to talk about a little bit about, again, about ethical naturalism. Ethical naturalism, this is my fifth video in this series. Ethical naturalism is essentially saying that moral ethical properties can be investigated and known in the same way that moral or that any other natural scientific property can be known or investigated. They fit into a scientific world, and they can be known, investigated, and learned just like any other natural thing can. There is a corresponding moral epistemology with all of this, with every single second order theory in ethics, or every meta-ethical theory. There is a corresponding ethical or moral epistemology as to how we can know about these things. How can we know about like in moral realism, there's a way that we can know about all these things. In ethical naturalism, what is the moral epistemology is really that we can know about moral facts just like we can know about anything else. That makes me think about how do we know anything else? How do we know that the sky is blue because of scattered? How do we know that the sky is blue due to scattered particles and light shining through them to make this blue color? How do we know about that? How do we know that if I do this, it will fall? How do we know that? How do we know that the moon is light at night because it's reflecting the light off the sun? How do we know these things? We know these things. We know these things because they are easily investigatable. We can easily investigate them and learn about the natural world. We can learn about all these things easily. Some things are not so easily learned. We can't just know things immediately. They take some experiments and exploration and all this. There's how do we know that I'm at a certain place in the earth? How do we know that since I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, which is in North America, which means that basically the world is like, let's say this is the world and I'm right here. Why am I not falling off? We know those things because of science. We have come to know those things ever since Aristophanes and Hipparchus and all those Greek people. We have been able to come to know all these things through science, because they are not natural facts. Now that makes me think about how can we compare things like gravity and the laws of thermodynamics and laws of physics and all this stuff. And even just like how we know what the reason we know that the moon is bright because of the sun. How do all these things compare to ethical and moral things? I don't think that they really do compare. Personally, I think that all these things that we learn in science, they are start as hypotheses, and they go to, theories, and then they sometimes and become laws. They are. Science has become so good that so many things are known to be sure about them. It's become a game of becoming sure about things, or rather than becoming, I don't really know about that. We go in a very long process of sometimes to coming to know something, but once we know something, we know it. We know it for sure, for absolute surety. Now, compare that to how we come to know about moral facts, about ethical facts. The reason there are nihilists and emotivists and cognitivists and non-cognitivists and prescriptivists and descriptivists and and then even deontologists and consequentialists and virtue ethicists and care ethicists and feminist ethicists and all these different theories and all this stuff. I mean, we can look at science, right? Science, there's a lot of theories in science. There are a lot of different camps, to where they put themselves in science. But then compare that to the ethical landscape. Compare that to how many camps and groups and theories and thoughts and philosophies that there are in ethics and thoughts on morality. Think about that. There's moralism, nihilism, prescriptivism, descriptivism, contractarianism, contractualism, deontology, consequentialism, Kantianism, intuitionism. The list goes on and on. Error theorists. The list goes on and on and on. Like, I couldn't possibly even think about it. Yeah, it's so vast, and the reason it's so vast is because there are only arguments. There are no laws. There are theories and laws. There are theories and arguments, but there are no laws in ethics. There are no laws in morality. That's because I think that a lot of morality and a lot of what makes us do certain things becomes a part of emotion, character states. I think it's a lot of unwieldy things that we can't really get a hold of. It's the reason that there's so many camps, there's so many theorists, so many theories, and no laws, because there's nothing in ethics that we can be sure about. Nothing. I mean, we can be sure that there are certain common sense laws. There is a few things that we can't be sure about in ethics. We can be sure that there are some common sense things, like when someone says no fair. If you read C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, he talks about in the beginning. How come if you do something unfair to somebody, someone says no fair, and someone does certain things, and there are things that there's just like sometimes there's a kind of filter of what you do and what you don't do when you're around people. There's just a certain kind of filter in here of what you do and don't do, and say and don't say. We are pretty sure that there is a certain form of that, and there are people like antisocial people and psychopaths and sociopaths and all these people who are not right in the head, who don't do those things. But then we can show that there's most of us who do. We do have a filter on what we do and say. If we get pissed at someone and say, I'm gonna kill that guy. We don't, unless we have an issue in here. If we're like, I'm so pissed, I could totally kill him. We don't, because we know it's against the law. We know it's wrong, and we know that we would not be able to live with ourselves. We know that there's a common sense morality. I have videos where I do talk about that in my deontology series. That's really all we're sure of. And I'm saying that we're sure of that because we have a basis of figuring out what this comes from. There are nihilists who say that this common sense morality thing is bullshit. But can you see what I'm trying to say here? Is that on the science side of how we figure out that there's gravity and laws of physics and chemistry and all this stuff. There's theories, and then there's laws. There's laws of how much that they're sure about it. Because there's so much surety in science. There's so much certainty. Because it's true. They're natural facts. We have a method of figuring them out and finding what there is to be certain on, and what we're not certain about, and we get laws about that stuff. In ethics, it's the total opposite. So, I think moral epistemology. There's not a whole lot we can know about ethics of us. There's not a whole lot we can know. There's not really a whole lot we can really know about. There is not a whole lot we can be sure of. There's not a whole lot of knowledge in ethics. There's a lot of speculation in metaethics, and then in normative ethics, there's speculation on what should be done and how we should think about doing it, and the way that we should think about doing X and Y and Z and W. That's it. So, yeah, the moral epistemology is very small. It's very, very small. The moral knowledge is very small. What we can know in morality and ethics is very small.